Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. This is episode 261. Wow. I'm your co-host, Russ.
I'm your co-host, Mike. Amazed that we've done so many episodes, and we just soldier on. Unbelievable.
They keep rolling along. However, just for our regular listeners, we're actually going to take a week off next week.
Yeah, we're doing more of those. We're getting older, more work. Getting too hard to do this every week.
Well, my regular full-time academic job sometimes requires some additional duties of me, and it's requiring quite a few things in the next 2 weeks. So not only will I have reduced listening time, but I'm not going to have any time for the production side of things for a little while. So we'll be back, hopefully, with our next new episode on June 15th after this one.
And if you are complaining about that, you can start funding us, and we'll do it every week. I promise. We'll make this our full-time job.
Yeah. Well, maybe when we retire, we'll do this every day.
Maybe. I think I'm going to need a break if we do it every day.
Yeah, probably.
There are days I really don't want to hear music, even though it's what I like most, you know.
Yes, silence is also important sometimes, too. Mm. Sometimes I just turn everything off.
Right.
And get a book or sit in the dark.
Well, another thing, though, you have to also absorb what you're listening to. Like, if you're hearing, like, a really heavy work, sometimes it takes days for it to settle, you know.
That's true.
Or a recording or something someone did. You don't really get it until, like, something, for me, even sometimes months later.
Yeah.
You know?
We'll talk about something related to that with one of the albums we're going to discuss today, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
But before we get into anything, we've got a really big one to talk about this week. Probably almost everyone has heard, but let me get over to the piano again this week. Sonny Rollins, the great tenor saxophonist, passed away on May 25th at age 95. Born Walter Theodore Rollins on September 7th in 1930 in New York City, Rollins was one of the most influential jazz tenor saxophonists in history. Growing up in Harlem near the Savoy Ballroom and the Apollo Theater, he got into music from an early age. Initially, he was inspired by Coleman Hawkins, and he became part of the bebop scene, recording with Bud Powell, Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, and Thelonious Monk while still in his teens. He composed lasting standards such as Olio, Doxy, Erigen, and battling heroin addiction in the early 1950s. He overcame that and came back from it even stronger, playing with the Clifford Brown Max Roach Quintet. His 1956 recording, Saxophone Colossus, proved him to be a master of thematic improvisation and creative soloing, with other standout albums like Way Out West and A Night at the Village Vanguard, showing off his innovative trio work and quick wit. He was known for his strong practice ethic, including a famous 1959 period of time he spent practicing on the Williamsburg Bridge. He influenced and was also influenced by John Coltrane, though their only recording together is the title track of the 1956 album Tenor Madness. Sonny Rollins recorded over 60 albums across 7 decades, getting 2 Grammys, a Lifetime Achievement Award, and honors like the National Medal of Arts. He leaves a huge legacy as a transformative figure in modern jazz who constantly evolved and searched for new forms of expression in his playing. So rest in peace, the great Sonny Rollins.
The great Sonny Rollins. And he lived a very long life, too, which is kind of reassuring. So it's good.
And speaking of legacy, we'll be checking out works inspired by the legacy of 3 other jazz masters in the second half of the episode, so stick around for that.
We have a theme tonight. How about that?
It just happens to be anniversary year of the birth of some jazz giants. So we'll talk about that later. But before we get into things, in the episode description, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all of the recordings we're discussing here. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all of the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. If you can't see the full description, or if the recording list or links are hard to follow or access wherever you're listening to us now, you can always come over and check us out on our host site. That's Podbean, podbean.com. Everything's easy to follow there. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you enjoy listening to us, and tell a music-loving friend. Help us grow our audience. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that also helps us get listed in the music category recommendations, and that's another way we can grow our audience. You can come and follow us on our Facebook page as well to get extra info and some more new release information, you can leave a message or comment there. You can check us out on X. We're Adult Music Pod over there, and I post links to the new episode as well. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. And this week in the classical, we're going to go way back.
Way back. Well, we've been back there before.
Yeah, but back further than the Baroque.
Back to the Renaissance and troubled times. Now, you may say, hey, we're living in troubled times now, aren't we? Well, no, not like back then. One of the things about knowing something about history, like, I really love reading about ancient Rome and things like that, is when you see things happening in modern times, you kind of say, oh, well, in ancient Rome, this thing that was far worse happened, and you don't feel as bad, Although I really would prefer that things went smoothly. But anyway, it turns out that living in England during the Renaissance wasn't such a great thing either. It was they were troubled times indeed, and I'll talk about that in a moment. This album is called Troubled Times, Music and Espionage in Renaissance England. Well, I got to tell you, this album is kind of light on the espionage.
There's some backstory, though.
There is backstory, but I think they're just kind of putting it in there to excite the listener, I guess. Anyway, this is an album by the Queen's Six and features a few appearances by the Rose Consort of Viols as well. The Queen's Six is a choral ensemble, and the Rose Consort of Viols are a viol ensemble, so they do instrumentals. This is on the Signum label, released on May 22nd. And it's May 30th now, huh? Boy, I thought it was already June. Anyway, I'm already living in the future. Anyway, this program starts with composers writing at the time of Henry VIII. It's the time when he split from the church in Rome, and the program explores the period with a collection of works that tell a story of the ways in which composers managed to survive troubled times. Some refused to submit, like Wilby and Pearson. Some moved abroad, like Peter Phillips and Dering. And some were suspected of espionage, John Bull, Thomas Morley, and Alfonso Ferrabosco I. But we don't really get too far with this espionage thing. They just kind of mention it. In that period, music came under heavy scrutiny from the authorities in a way that reminded me of the Soviet Union, really.
Yeah.
Though maybe not quite as severe. Florid polyphony had been denounced by the reformers, and henceforth religious music must be a vernacular English with textural intelligibility paramount. If a composer's music seemed implicated in undermining the authority of the Anglican Church, or if they themselves were associated with the Catholic community, the penalties might be severe.
English only rules.
English only rules, yeah. The booklet note goes through each composer and how he struggled with authority, and I recommend that you read that because it's actually a pretty interesting listen, kind of like reading a novel in some cases. All right, well, one of the great things about having to works be in vernacular English is that we, here in the 21st century, get to hear polyphonic works in English because they're usually in Latin or Italian or something like that, all right? And not all of these works are in English. Some of them are in Latin, which probably would have made them more Catholic-oriented at the time. Yeah, the Mass was Latin until really the 1960s, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was only recent that we had vernacular Masses in the Catholic Church. Anyway, track 1, John Bull, Almighty God, which by the leading of a star. Now, the viols feature in this, and they provide a sad, weepy sound. Now, the Queen's Six are in with accented but smoothly flowing voices in harmony. So we get the whole soup like right away on this album.
Yeah.
They don't introduce separate ensembles at different times. They give us everything at once. The overall sound has a muted glow to it on this, like candlelight, and that's not going to be the case with all of the works. I think it might just be the way this is composed or even performed with all of the musicians present. The text is, of course, referring to the Magi finding baby Jesus. The tone of the work is somber, and right away I have to say it's nice to hear English texts set polyphonically, as it's easier to follow the words and sense the effects. There's a lot of like tone painting and this sort of thing in these sorts of works. I like the rising lines starting around 3 minutes and 25 seconds. It's an appealing section, and I'm going to go right for that for our first sample tonight. why I said a full ensemble, but there are only 6 voices, so there's good transparency to the sound. You can hear to the back and hear every voice individually. You sort of get the sense that the voices are rising up to God as we hear them rising in that sample. I get the idea of them riding an escalator, like like the movie A Matter of Life and Death, which some Americans know as Stairway to Heaven with David Niven. Does anyone know that movie? By the Archers, Powell and Pressburger. Check it out; it's a great movie from the 1940s, the war years. Maybe not to everybody's taste, but I think for older people, we'll all like it. Okay. Track 2, John Taverner. Now, this is not the 20th century John Taverner. This is Taverner with an R. He's often referred to as Taverner the Elder to distinguish him from his 20th century similarly named counterpart. Anyway, this is called Quemad Modum. Stylistically, it's Taverner's most mature work. Text is Latin, and it says, as the heart, S-H-A-R-T, heart, the animal, seeks the water brooks, my soul longs for God. I like that image, actually. Yeah. It's also got a somber, pleading feel to it. There's a break after the first 2 lines to reset the harmony to the beginning. Then the third line of text starts in much the same somber style. The Queen 6 goes for a muted tone here. The sound has a creamy quality to it, blending smoothly. And some ensembles want all the voices to jump out at you, but here the voices are more blended together. Actually, they will jump out at us on later tracks. Track 3, Richard Sampson, Quam Pulchra Es, another Latin language track. And I really loved the almost disembodied statement of the title words at the beginning of this work. Pulchra is beautiful, I think, in Latin, so how beautiful is the title? Let's hear the opening. Okay, so we got a little bit of a cadence in there, and we'll come out right there.
I found the movement of the lines really interesting, and I made a note. This is the oldest work on the recording, 1516.
No, I didn't even notice that. Okay, but I did notice the beauty of the moving lines, though. The overall sound of the Queen's 6 is a bit more stark here rather than blending together, probably a result of the spacing of the harmony. The voices here stand out, and there's a languorous feel to the pacing of the work, which comes from the rather erotic Song of Songs. The title means how beautiful you are, and continues with the lover complimenting his love's physical qualities. The work is set in sections. There are pauses between them. I thought this was a standout performance on this album, or perhaps it stands out in juxtaposition to the creamier sound the ensemble applies to the first 2 tracks. The voices all have distinct timbres to them, and this is a versatile ensemble. Track 4, William Byrd. Interesting composer, by the way. He was Catholic, and he was also a favorite of Queen Elizabeth, who was a Protestant. So I guess she protected him a bit. She liked his music, but he always had to watch his back. Anyway, this is his composition Cunctis Diebus. Beautiful entries by the smooth, vibratoless voices here. Let's hear this. It's also quiet, kind of intimate, too. The piece maintains this transparency and clarity throughout, great spacing of the harmony, and here each voice is perfectly audible. As more voices come in the next section at around the 1 minute and 10 second mark, there's a slight change to a more nasal sound, and the layering makes the music more opaque sounding, but still clear. Beautiful cadence and transition to the next section at 2 minutes and 41 seconds and on to the end of the piece. By the way, that changing to that nasal sound, I really like it when these ensembles will all change the style of attack on their voices too, just to create like a new color. Right. This is another great thing to listen to with modern, say, Renaissance era ensembles like this. Track 5, Alfonso Ferrabosco I, Vias Tuas, and this is for viols only. So this features the Rose Consort of Viols, and it's the second part of Ferrabosco's Latin motet, Vias Tuas Domine, which is set to the words of Psalm 25. This is the first of the album that we hear the Rose Consort of Viols solo. We'll only hear them solo twice. The piece is somber, which is expected given the tone of the viols. These pieces are always like that. The piece has a conjunct quality to it, so not jumping around. It's kind of, all of the voices are smooth, with the instruments blending well. And it stays like that for the rest of the piece. Really beautiful playing. Track 6, Martin Pearson, Who Will Rise Up? Okay, we're back to English language. This starts with some very obvious tone painting with the line, Who will rise up with me, sung in a rising pattern. And the with me is harmonized. So you want to notice this. Who will rise up with me? You're going to hear rising lines, and then with me has harmony all of a sudden. It's easy to spot these when the work is in your native language, English. Listen to this. It's very cute. Yes, tone painting like that would have delighted audiences from the Renaissance era.
I'm sure.
Yeah. All of the voices seem to move in what we would think of as quarter notes and eighth notes, all landing together on the beat. Now, of course, they didn't have these designations back then. If you've seen Renaissance era music, they're just like these dots on a page, and you have to figure this part out for yourself. They disperse polyphonically at times, but that's the main feel. The line, but my soul has been put to silence, is sung as chords. This comes across with great clarity in the individual lines. Track 7, John Wilby. I'm guessing that's how you say that. It could be Will By. I don't know. Oh God, the rock of my whole strength. This is brief at 1 minute and 44 seconds. It starts with a harmonized rising pattern and is in English as well. It gets a dotted rhythm at about the 40-second mark, making the text leap out of the texture. It feels like it could go on a lot longer, but comes to a quick cadence at the end. Track 8, Thomas Morley, Out of the Deep. This is Morley's only verse anthem. An anthem in this meaning is a setting of a religious text specifically meant for the Anglican or Protestant church services. The viols start this piece, and a solo voice, who happens to be Nicholas Madden, the tenor, sings the first line solo. as you hear, the ensemble comes in for the next verse. It alternates between solo and choral voices from there, and this is a calmly flowing work, and the viols accompany throughout. Another work by Thomas Morley follows on track 9, Eheu sustulerunt, in Latin. This starts as a single sustained voice. When the harmony comes in, it's clear that this is going to be a somber piece, and indeed the words are, "Alas, they have taken away my Lord," the words of despair spoken by Mary Magdalene when she comes upon Jesus' empty tomb, speaking, unbeknownst to her, to Jesus himself. The track is pretty brief at 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Its lamenting quality is well caught here. It ends with a satisfying cadence. Track 10, Thomas Morley, Domine Dominus Noster. The opening solo voice is in the bass range here, and others come floating above. The work has a drifting quality, and the words are, "O Lord our Governor, how excellent is thy name in all the world." I'm really loving the deep bass voice pinning down the harmony on this track. Listen for that in this sample. Man, you hear those cadences that you think are coming, and then it just veers off into another direction. Really fascinating. If you kind of know your harmony and the way music resolves, this really gets exciting when you hear that subverted somehow. That bass voice was not front and center on the recording, but nevertheless, you do notice it. Your ear sort of goes right to it if you're listening to the bass. All right, moving on. John Bull on track 11, In Nomine. This is for viols only. In the uniquely English In Nomine, one part, usually the altus, holds the plain song Gloria Tibi Trinitas in slow notes, while the other voices weave intricate counterpoint around it. Now, the way to spot that is which voice is moving most slowly. That's the plain song. This is a fairly brief piece for the viols with a bit more energy to it. It's got a thinner harmony, and the lines move pretty actively. Well, the ones that are weaving counterpoint around the plain song are. I'll let you sample this one on your own. Track 12, attributed to Alfonso Ferrabosco I, Laboravi in gemitu meo. I like the gentle descent of the opening line as the lower male voices come in for harmonic support. The piece flows from this starting point in full harmony, with individual lower voices occasionally peeking out of the texture. The text is from Psalm 6, verse 6, I am weary of my groaning. Every night I wash my bed in water, and water my couch with my tears. Oh. Track 13, attributed to Alfonso Ferrabosco II, which I think is the first's son. Fuerunt mihi lacrimae. The vocals start in the bass and rise up through the vocal ranges from there. It's a slow-moving lament, again about tears, this time from Psalm 42, verse 3. The lower voices dominate in this piece and resonate strongly. Nevertheless, there's a good separation between the lines in the composition and consequently on the recording. We think this is the son's composition. It might be his dad's, but let's sample it anyway. Pretty layered harmony there.
Yeah, he was a real fan of the suspension.
He really was. The words are followable, especially in headphones, despite the thickness of the texture. Suspensions, yeah, those are really fun. Track 14, William Byrd, O Salutaris Hostia a Six. A plea for God's aid during war. This starts in a low range, and rather surprisingly, an even lower vocal line then comes in. It's a pretty interesting opening. From there, we get the full range of the Queen's Sixth, but the opening is really attention-grabbing. Let's hear this. You don't expect that lower voice to come in after you hear a low voice start the piece.
And great passing dissonances.
Yeah, a lot of those too. One of the best things about Renaissance era music, by the way, the passing dissonance. They really just add a little bit of that spice to the harmony. The way that those dissonances resonate in these voices hurts so good, as a certain modern pop singer would say. Track 15, Peter Phillips, Beata Agnes, a prayer for Saint Agnes. Phillips was Catholic and wound up leaving England and spending much of his career in the Spanish Netherlands. This work sets a prayer to Saint Agnes and starts in the higher range, with the rest of the ensemble suddenly coming in like a blanket with harmony. The piece will lighten at times when the lower voices and higher alternate lines as if in conversation, one repeating the other's line. It's an interestingly structured composition that I'll leave you to sample in full. And in fact, it's hard to sample simply because it's got so many parts that kind of change its character. It's really interesting. Track 16, Richard Dering, Factum est Silentium. Dering, like Phillips, spent most of his career in the Spanish Netherlands. This starts quietly, appropriately enough, since the first line is, "There was silence in heaven," and this is sung in Latin, of course. After that, the texture briefly finds a bouncing, light-hearted rhythm. In fact, there are a lot of moods in this piece suddenly appearing, including a joyful, bouncing Alleluia at the end. It's a hard one to sample. The effect comes from all the juxtapositions of textures and rhythms, so I'll leave you to sample this one too. And then track 17, the final track on the album, William Byrd, Teach Me, O Lord. So we end with an English text. Here the solo singer Elizabeth Paul sings, Teach me, O Lord, the way of thy statutes. Let's hear it. It's a great cadence. I'm going to come out right there to end the sample, although the piece goes on. Viols accompany, and at the line, give me understanding, the rest of the ensemble are in, and the vocal alternates between soloist and lower-voiced ensemble. And that's the end of the album. With the title Troubled Times, you would guess that this is a pretty solemn album of Renaissance-era choral works, and you would be right, though moments of joy do appear at times, only briefly though. The works on it are all rarely heard, and the concept of troubled times is an effective umbrella under which to assemble them. So first I'd like to commend the Queen's Six for the creativity of the concept. It's also a real treat to hear a large amount of Renaissance works in English. There aren't enough recordings like this. Here the English works are interspersed with Latin ones, but no matter, there's an ample amount of English language compositions, and it especially makes the tone painting stand out. The singing of the Queen's Six blends well, and they get different textures on different works. Those at the beginning feature harmony that blends together, and in later parts of the program, individual voices start to stand out more. Or maybe my ear just adjusted. Having the Rose Consort of Viols accompany on some tracks and provide respite during their 2 solo tracks also kept the ear and the attention of the listener engaged. It's a solemn album that nevertheless is programmed to bring out a variety of vocal textures and rhythmic changes, and is a real discovery of music that is relatively unheard. There are some real treasures here.
In our modern time, it's hard to imagine how strong the religious and political influences were on music back in the Renaissance. We've heard works by Bird before, but this recording brought out a sense of his versatility and style to me. He's a very interesting composer. I'm always interested in the harmony of Renaissance works, and this recording had a lot of interesting examples. Tracks 12, we didn't sample that one, and 13 by Ferrabosco really built on released tension with suspensions, and Bird's O Salutarius Hosea had interesting dissonances throughout the piece that really caught my ear. I enjoyed the vocal performances by the Queen's Six a lot on this recording, and the Rose Consort of Viols were excellent as well. A lot of the a cappella works on this recording are really striking, and the sound quality is fine as well.
Yeah, by the way, before I go on to the next album, I want to mention that just this Friday or recently, a harpsichord album by Dmytro Kokoshinsky was released called Music for These Troubled Times. So this seems to be a big theme in the air these days. Now, that's an album also of Renaissance music by English composers. So I think that might be a good companion to this album. So maybe you should check that one out too. That's on the Fuga Libera label. So you can research that yourself. Next, we will indeed go to the harpsichord. And that's the reason why I didn't want to kind of include that one now here, because we have a harpsichord recording for the 20th century. This is called Clavecin, I guess, Vent, I don't know, 20. Clavecin Vent, or Harpsichord 20. And this features Justin Taylor, one of our favorite harpsichordists, and the Orchestre Nationale de Lille, conducted by Chloé Dufresne. And this is released on the Alpha label on May 22nd. The booklet notes take the form of an interview between an unknown questioner and Taylor himself. Actually, I didn't look. They might have named the questioner at the bottom. He talks about the history of how the harpsichord was perceived, saying that the tone of the harpsichord undeniably has a scent of the past to it, and it is interesting to see how composers have accommodated their style to it, whether by adopting its historic heritage or by taking the instrument into the realms of more modern and innovatory writing. I think of George Ligety's A Continuum for Harpsichord, which would be a good example of the latter. The program is structured around 4 great concertos that explore different sides of the harpsichord in the 20th century. All of the works are recorded on a single instrument, a harpsichord built in the 1970s by Anthony Sidey, S-I-D-E-Y. It's a hybrid model somewhere between the Pleyel harpsichords of the 1920s and the much earlier period instruments, which would have gotten a much quieter tone. This instrument gets a genuinely loud tone for itself. It's got a lot of sustain, too. For a harpsichord, please. It's nothing like a piano. The instrument has 2 main stops, a 4-foot and a 16-foot, and 2 lute stops, the lighter ones, with a pedal enabling a rapid change of register. Okay, harpsichord music by, well, not really, but Bela Bartok from his Mikrokosmos for piano. Now, this is going to be, of course, played on the harpsichord. This is composed in 1940. The piece is number 79 in Volume 3, called Hommage à JSB, and we know who JSB is, don't we? Do I have to say it? Johann Sebastian Bach, because I know we have some new listeners. This really is closer to the Wanda Landowska oversized harpsichord sound that we heard when the harpsichord was reintroduced as a sound into classical music, I guess in the mid-20th century. It really doesn't sound like the instrument you hear on Baroque albums these days. It sounds like much bigger.
Right.
The piece sounds completely transformed from its original piano version. Tracks 2 through 6, Jean Francais, who lived 1912 to 1997, Concerto for Harpsichord and Instrumental Ensemble, composed in 1959. This was written in the spirit of chamber music. It combines the sounds of harpsichord, flute, and strings. And you have a French composer writing for the harpsichord and flute, and you know that those timbres are going to be used to their maximum pleasure. And in fact, Jean Francais, I think in his career, wrote mostly, if not only, sunny works. They all sound so uplifting and cheerful. with the rhythm, with the harmony, with the brightness of the sound. It's just fantastic. This work itself is full of humor, laced with witty allusions to Baroque forms, because the harpsichord, right? We think of Baroque, the Baroque era,
Right.
and is altogether a sunny work itself. And we're going to really enjoy this, I think. Track 2 is the first movement, Toccata 1. This has a cute wind opening, followed by celebratory harpsichord. The harpsichord harmony sounds dense, and it holds its own with the orchestra here. Let's just hear the entire opening. Okay, we get into some of those 20th century harmonic byways there
Yep.
as the piece goes on. I really love the idea of having those plucked strings, the pizzicati, accompanying the really kind of quiet-sounding harpsichord here. It's such a great effect. The harpsichord line is repetitive, and the winds have melodic lines. I like the occasional addition of orchestral bass to thicken the sound. It only comes at strategic moments. The play suddenly stops at the end, and the flute comes back for a sensual line that connects this movement to the next, which is Toccata 2, track 3. The harpsichord has the main arpeggiated line here, with strings playing pizzicato accents yet again. All right.
Charming.
Charming, and also harkening back to the Baroque a little bit because of the harpsichord sound. Very nice. Kind of has that Baroque drawing room kind of quality to it. The pizzicati wind up taking the theme for most of the movement, then toward the end, the flute is back in. Wish I haven't heard that yet, but we'll get to it. Track 4, the third movement, Andantino. All movements in this work connect. This one features a unison line between harpsichord and one in the violins. There are also pizzicati from the rest of the string section. The melody drifts in modal fashion. Francais uses a lot of modes in his compositions, another thing that draws me to them. At the 1 minute and 10-second mark, a more dance-like, unbridled theme suddenly starts up. There are changes of orchestration as the themes repeat. I like the kaleidoscopic quality of those changes. Track 5 is the fourth movement, Menuet. The Menuet starts with a rather charming, muted harpsichord sound. Here, the instrument sounds like an older harpsichord. The orchestra, led by a flute, play a melody that the harpsichord responds to. The timbral combinations suddenly change in 1 minute and 24 seconds. This has a light, gushing quality to it in the strings, and I like the way the harpsichord twinkles in the background. When it comes out to play solo at 3 minutes and 3 seconds, it plays with the lighter strings, the lute stop, making it sound like a Baroque-era instrument. At the 3 minute and 42-second mark, the harpsichord gets a solo spot. It introduces the flute line, and the harpsichord tone here is muted. The muted instrument sort of creeps to the end of the movement, which this time comes to a full ending. Again, you're going to have to sample that on your own. I'll give you a sample here, though. The 6th track is the 5th movement finale. Urgently bowed strings and harpsichord, and the winds play flurried glissandi like birds soaring away from the harpsichord. The harpsichord is very busy in this movement. There are some schmaltzy moments as well, as at 1 minute and 20 seconds, and guess what? That's what I'm going to sample. Here we go. It's hilarious. The string lines. The harpsichord gets center stage at around the 2-minute and 35-second mark with his moto perpetuo line, and the piece ends with a quick chord from the harpsichord. Now, if you like what you heard there, I recommend checking out this composer, Jean-Français. There are a few recordings of his music. They're all really upbeat and cheerful like that, and light. Track 7, Stéphane Gassot. He's a contemporary composer, born in 1987, and this is his piece called Bluesinuum from 2019. Now, this work is written in homage to Ligoti's harpsichord piece Continuum, which Taylor has recorded on an earlier album which has that name, Continuum. Look for it on your streaming. It's got a yellow album cover. Unlike Ligoti's Continuum, this melody has a dotted rhythm. Meanwhile, the work bounces with enthusiasm, too. Let's hear a bit of this. It's really kind of a unique work for the harpsichord. Yeah, so it harkens back to the style of a lot of early like blues or jazz piano. And that's really setting the scene for the last track that we're going to hear on this album, which I'll mention when we get to it. Surprisingly, the harpsichord sounds bluesy and soulful in this piece. There are some wild Ligeti continuum-like passages suggesting waves from a graph. Tempo is pretty fast, and Taylor's energy here is infectious. He's got the feel, too. It's really great. The harpsichord ends the work with a minimalist pattern that keeps speeding up its note value and finally suddenly stops. Tracks 8 through 9. Henryk Górecki, 1933 to 2010. Harpsichord Concerto for Harpsichord and String Orchestra Opus 40, written in 1980. I actually have this recording on an earlier album released on the Nonesuch label a long time ago. This is only the second time I'm hearing it, though. This and the Poulenc work were recorded in Lille in September 2022, with the rest of the album recorded in Paris in October 2025. Taylor says he senses a distant echo in this work to Bach's Concerto in D minor for keyboard. Okay, well, you've been told. You can try to find that yourself. This seems like a really dark work to me. Track 8 is the first movement, Allegro Molto, and it starts off surprisingly ominously, and again with a perpetual motion sort of harpsichord, here playing arpeggiated figures. Yeah, these 20th century composers really do like that perpetual motion on this instrument. The chords and keyboard pattern repeat as in minimalist music. Yeah, I can imagine walking into the Addams Family house and hearing something like this.
It's kind of maniacal.
Yeah. The theme in the strings eventually comes out with a new theme that gives way to the opening again. The piece ends on a long sustained resolving chord. Track 9 is the second and final movement. This is only a 2-movement work. Vivace marcatissimo. Inspired by the world of mechanics and the repeated phrases of American minimalism, here, the harpsichord comes out with a Morse code-like chord-based theme, which the orchestra repeats. I kind of imagine heavy metal heads like headbanging to this. I can see that happening. I got a picture of it in my head. This sounds kind of maniacal too. It's actually really frantic here and builds a lot of tension. In fact, it gives the listener a lot of tension too. The movement sounds urgent and breathes well in the string part. The whole thing is well balanced between strings and harpsichord. New themes emerge in the strings, including one that has the theme glissandoing between notes. There's a rather sudden entry of the bass into the harmony at around the 2-minute and 50-second mark that's satisfying when it appears. At the very end, the chugging rhythm stops and we get one last flourish from the harpsichord before the final chord. Okay, I think this album's Pièce de Résistance comes next. This is tracks 10 through 12. Francis Poulenc's Concert Champêtre for harpsichord and orchestra, composed 1927 to 1928. This is a genuinely soloistic concerto, and the work revives the elements of the past in a contemporary setting. It's pretty great. Track 10 is the first movement, Allegro molto, and this is a real release from the Gorecki Concerto. This is very lyrical and immediately appealing. There's so many great themes in this, in fact, that you'll just love it, like all the way through. The harpsichord is in solo with a theme at around the 30-second mark. It's a spacious theme. We also get a full orchestra here, so winds play a large role, as does Poulenc's ear for orchestration in general. At 1 minute and 26 seconds, the theme is stated grandly in the orchestra, almost to Hollywood proportions. At 2 minutes and 9 seconds, the introduction is over, and the main, cheerful, even playful theme is in, and that's what I'm going to sample. Yeah, some great playing around with the rhythm there, too. Yeah. There's a lot going on, so it's really immediately appealing, and it's also got all these, like, sort of little intellectual things for your brain as well. All sections of the orchestra get a chance to be heard in the coming themes, and the movement maintains its upbeat feeling up until the 3 minute and 53-second mark, when there's a pause, followed by an ominous fanfare. The harpsichord answers with an equally mysterious take on the fanfare, sounding very spare. Something that's more in line with a march follows, and I have to say, all of these themes sound great on the harpsichord. Despite the orchestral activity, the harpsichord never gets drowned out by the orchestra, amazingly enough. The music builds to an exciting climax at 7 minutes and 12 seconds, then suddenly stops again, leading the harpsichord to come in with a muted, lute-like tone at 7 minutes and 19 seconds. This section remains on the quiet side, with some fragile-sounding material played. At the 9 minute and 20-second mark, a sudden fanfare brings back the frenetic energy of earlier in the movement, and the harpsichord plays another cheerful theme at just before the 10-minute mark. The movement comes to a rousing ending, with the harpsichord followed by the orchestra landing on a final tonic chord. Track 11, the second movement, Andante. A drifting Siciliano rhythm theme begins the movement in the strings. It's very traditionally laid out, with a B section to it as well. At the 55-second mark, the solo harpsichord is in, playing a chord-based line. The orchestra bring in the Siciliano theme again, and the harpsichord plays filigree lines around it. On repetition, the string theme fills out as far as orchestral lushness goes. At 3 minutes and 25 seconds, the harpsichord begins a more tense theme, starting with trills, ending on ominous chords. At the end, the Siciliano rhythm is back with more solid harmony from the orchestra, and the movement ends on a statement from the harpsichord that leads to a final chord. Track 12 is the third movement, Finale. The first theme here sounds Italian at first, but then gets away from that rhythm and goes through popular music idioms of the time. The sort of things you'd hear at a dance hall. Let's hear a little bit of this. We'll hear the Italian theme first, and then how it morphs into more dance hall-oriented themes, of which I guess the Italian theme would be one. it goes on. That opening theme has like kind of a Pop Goes the Weasel kind
Yeah,
of quality
it does,
to
yeah.
it. The movement's frenetic, playful energy has the material quickly changing from theme to theme, and even from musical idiom to musical idiom. It feels a bit like a carnival atmosphere, a constantly changing scene like we hear in Stravinsky's Petrushka, though the material is very different. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, the material slows down, and there's a bit of a romantic interlude. At 5 minutes and 30 seconds, the energy picks up again. I should mention the harpsichord is very busy throughout this concerto-length work, and Taylor remains in the musical moment throughout, always playing with character along with the required virtuosity. In fact, he's been very impressive on this entire album. I really should have mentioned him more often. At the 7 minute and 15 second mark, there's a pause, leading the harpsichord to slowly ruminate via unison harmony. The harpsichord has the last word on a line in the bass end. Track 13, a composer I've really come to love over the last year, Bohuslav Martinu, 1890 to 1959, 2 impromptus for harpsichord, H381, 1959. This is the second of the impromptus. Doesn't have a title, just marked 2. This has a dancing quality at its opening and requires some rhythmic impetus and agility to play, and of course, Justin Taylor has that. Let's hear a bit of this. Interesting choice of instrument to choose for a composition like this. This is a brief work at 2 minutes and 20 seconds and remains lively throughout and features occasional polyphonic lines. It's a lively, fun-sounding piece. We get to the last of the concertos on the album, Manuel de Falla, concerto for harpsichord, flute, oboe, clarinet, violin, and cello, composed 1923 to 1926, and this is tracks 14 through 16 on the album. Falla's harpsichord concerto was the first to be composed in the 20th century. It's closer to a chamber music conversation in which the harpsichord predominates. It freely draws on Baroque techniques such as imitation and canon, but never falls into neo-Baroque style. Track 14, the first movement, is marked Allegro. The work starts with energy, and we get to hear different registers of the harpsichord right from the beginning. Its terraced dynamics are on display here. Now, terraced dynamics means what you think. The dynamics change from soft to loud to levels instead of like gradually crescendoing or decrescendoing. Anyway, let's hear the opening. Yeah, so pretty intriguing stuff right away. The winds come in, and the harpsichord continues to play maniacally in the background. Great writing for the winds in this movement. The harpsichord plays busily when it's in. It comes across as an electronic device that's either turned on or off. At the 1 minute and 45 second mark, the harpsichord has chords, accenting the orchestra's material. The Baroque quality of this movement is evident in its almost constant motion. Track 15 is the second movement, Lento. The harpsichord starts the movement with a piano-like arpeggiated figure. The strings are in with a cadence figure, then start with melodic material, thick but with a Baroque shape to it. It stays like this for a while, not finding a way through to whatever comes next until the phrase at 1 minute and 25 seconds, which extends the material. There are a lot of arpeggiated chords in the harpsichord part, as though it's a guitar. After the 4 minute mark, the opening material comes back after a bit of an excursion away from it to bring the movement to a close. And track 16, the third movement, Vivace, this has a lively dancing feel to it. Orchestration here is interesting, constantly shifting into different timbres, most of them involving winds, while the harpsichord plays taking a back seat, but constantly moving as well. It peaks out for several measures before being overtaken by the orchestra again, and this goes on till the end of the piece. And then track 17, the big surprise I've been telling you about, that's set up by the earlier work Bluesinuum by Stéphane Gassot. Track 17 is Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag from 1899. Now, Taylor says he made the unusual choice to play this on the harpsichord because, since the modern piano has appropriated a lot of the harpsichord repertoire, why not even things up? The Polish harpsichordist Elizabeth Choznaka, who gave the first performance of Górecki's concerto, recorded an album devoted to Scott Joplin herself. The popular cheerful side of his music is particularly well caught by the sound of the harpsichord, and I guess it's not so surprising how well this comes across. I was a little surprised, but in the end I really wasn't. It fits the sound really well. Let's hear the opening of this very famous work. We could just stay here all day listening to that, couldn't we?
You know, I think that works pretty well because we often hear old recordings on sort of old and not the best sounding pianos,
right,
that are a bit rattly or shaky, and that little extra fuzz on the harpsichord sound gives it a lot of charm.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting observation. I never thought of that. This really can be played on any keyboard instrument with a short sustain. I kind of wonder what it would sound like on a Fender Rhodes. I don't know. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Taylor sounds like he's got his feel of ragtime down here, and this comes across cheerfully and doesn't sound out of place at all on this stylistically diverse album. Yeah, this is a fantastic record, a great programming idea by Justin Taylor. He's put together a unique album of music by seeking out works for the harpsichord from the 20th century. Really, on this recording, the harpsichord is the only common denominator. All of the works stylistically diverge to such an extent that you'd wonder why they're on the same album if it weren't for the common solo instrument. Of the major works, the Francais is new to me, and what a sunny, uplifting find it is. It's appealing on a first listen, as is most of Francais' other music as well. The Górecki piece brings quite a bit of contrast with its anxiety and grayer overall sound. And as far as the Concert de Champêtre goes by Francis Poulenc, there have been a few recordings of it up to this point, but this may very well be the best one. Sonically, it's extremely well balanced, and the energy given to the performance is infectious. The Faya piece is also well balanced and gets a superlative performance here. I'd say it's the balance between the harpsichord and orchestra achieved on this album that make it stand out against other recordings of these works, some by very eminent harpsichordists from the past. Also, Justin Taylor brings a lot of really positive energy to this project, and it really comes through in all of his playing, most of which has to be energetic. It's like he's constantly moving. As for the solo works, Gassot's Bluesinuum brings some bluesy soul to Ligoti's original rhythmic ideas, and Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag is bound to raise some smiles at how good it sounds on this instrument. Bohuslav Martinu's Impromptu is also a work worth discovering. This is unmissable for fans of the instrument, and some rarely heard music from the 20th century greats all collected on a single album that intrigued me, as I'm sure it will intrigue others.
Justin Taylor's shaken off any of the Baroque dust covering the image of the harpsichord with this recording. It's a slightly odd but interesting collection of works. The Francais was fanciful and very French in tonal character. The Poulenc has a lot of French character as well, and his way with winds is really nice. Interestingly, the harpsichord has comparatively more ominous sounding lines than the orchestra, which made an interesting contrast to me. The Gassot and Górecki are more rhythmic and unusual. And then the final Joplin tune was like a little chocolate after the main courses and went down smoothly. We always enjoy Taylor's playing, but this recording makes us experience the sound and setting of the harpsichord in a different and more modern way, and I enjoyed it a lot.
It's really funny. French people, they don't come across in real life like they do in their music. It's like almost two totally different things.
Interesting.
Anyway, our contemporary album of the week, Viols and Wolf Kerschek, Trumpet Double Concertos. This is played by Matthias Höfs on the trumpet, and he actually does this as double concertos with Christian Schmitt on the organ for the Viols work, and Tillmann Höfs, his son, on the French horn for the Wolf Kerschek work. They're accompanied by the Münchner Rundfunk Orchestra, conducted by Christoph Altstaedt, and this is on the Berlin Classics label. The physical CD was released on May 15th for this, and the streaming was a week later, May 22nd. So a rare occasion when the CD comes out before the streaming.
Right.
Now, both of the works on this album were specifically written for Matthias Höfs. Tracks 1 through 6, Fazil Say, Turkish pianist and now composer as well. He's written a few works that have been recorded, some of which he's recorded as well. He was born in 1970, and this is his concerto for trumpet, organ, and string orchestra with percussion. Oh, snuck in the percussion there too. So Matthias Höfs is on the trumpet, Christian Schmitt is playing the organ, Mustafa Aykut Köselerli, I don't know if I've pronounced that right, but percussion, and the Munich Radio Orchestra, or the Münchner Rundfunk Orchestra, conducted by Christian Altstaedt. Track 1 is the first movement, Maestoso. The movement starts with a rather appealing chugging rhythm with a few staccato exclamations from the trumpet. You can hear the organ outlining arpeggiated harmony in the background. The trumpet starts adding figuration to his staccato accents at about 1 minute into the movement. I have to say the conducting is on the careful side here. The work moves, but not in an aggressive way, and the music sounds pretty aggressive to me. At the 1 minute and 45-second mark, it suddenly quiets and wispy strings play thematic material. At the 2 minute and 34-second mark, the trumpet and orchestra are back with the chugging rhythm taking form again. That's how the movement ends. Generally don't hear the organ march like that. The soloists blend in with the orchestra for the most part, rather than having a spotlight on them in the recording. They stand out due to their lines, and the movement ends, as you heard, very suddenly. Now, the second movement is divided over 3 tracks, and track 2 is the first part of it. It's an andante. A wispy, curvy figure comes in on the organ with the trumpet responding. We got some great trumpet lines coming up there, too. The strings begin chugging again. The organ is more up front here. There's a pretty cool solo section for organ and trumpet at around the 2 minute mark, which has the trumpet growling out single notes with slight glissando as the organ plays a crooked sounding staccato line. Here the trumpet is more up front, too. There's more of a spotlight on the 2 soloists in this movement. At 3 minutes and 45 seconds, the organ sustains a chord, pauses, and starts a tentative solo section with a reedy sound. At the 4 minute and 28-second mark, the trumpet responds with a solo section of its own. The organ begins a slight crescendo towards the end, and the music spills over into the next track, which is track 3, movement 2B, I guess section B of the second movement, Andante, Oriental, Slow, Erotical Dance. Here we have some percussion, and that's Mustafa Aykut Köselerli. He'll be playing in this and the next movement. He provides a rhythm that the trumpet, now with a mute, plays over. So a little something from the Ottoman era, I guess, there. A little erotic dance. The orchestra has some swooping glissandos, giving the work a Turkish feel. It suddenly speeds up and spills over into the next track, track 4, movement 2C, and it has a Turkish title. I don't know how to say this, but it's Oriental Fast Dance, Kosetse, or something like that, marked Presto. Here we have a full-on Turkish dance. Kind of funny hearing the organ playing that melody. The movement is full of national character, and it ends with an accented orchestral splash. This is one of the great things about composed music, is that you get to hear things like this. People kind of reflecting their own heritage in their music. Track 5, the third movement, or 3A, this is divided into 2 tracks as well. This is on track 5, Anatolian Romance. The organ starts the movement with a melancholy tone and circling melody. I want to get the solo organ into a sample, so I'm going to sample it at the beginning of this movement. The trumpet is in later at around the 2-minute mark, playing an attractive, lightly romantic melody with a muted tone. Soon the organ comes back, and there's a slithery rhythm and melody that recalls the Near East. The organ comes in for a more meditative part that ends this section of the movement as it began. Track 6 is the finale of the third movement. It's marked 3B here. Allegro assai. Let's just start by hearing it. Yeah, Fazil Say has a lot of interesting ideas for his orchestration especially. The second part of this movement begins with that trumpet playing the line and the orchestra picking it up, and Mustafa Aykut Köselerli is briefly heard again on a woody kind of percussion, maybe like a castanet. And then Höfs and Schmitt are back with their solo parts. More percussion of a more exciting, propulsive nature suddenly appears at the end. It inspires the trumpet and organ to pick up in energy and bring the work to a quick ending. Tracks 7 through 10, Wolf Kerschek, born in Hamburg, Germany in 1969. His work is called The Four Elements, and this is for trumpet, horn, and orchestra. Now, the trumpeter is, of course, Matthias Höfs, and playing the French horn here is his son, Tillmann Höfs. The work is kind of based on the four elements that are said to make up, I guess, the universe: water, air, earth, and fire. I always wondered about, like, the band Earth, Wind, and Fire. They didn't include water in that. I wonder why not. Yeah, I don't know. Something to think about. Anyway, we get water first in the first movement here on track 7. The beginning swirls to a big crash with brass coming in afterwards. In the aftermath of the sudden crash, tendrils of orchestral sound reappear. A pulsing xylophone tone repeats. It could just be percussion. I'm hearing it as a xylophone, though. There are pizzicati in the texture, too. This is around the 1 minute and 30 second mark, and it's an intriguing sound, so I'm already thinking Kerschek is creative with the orchestral timbres. At 1 minute and 45 seconds, the French horn is in, and soon the trumpet is heard along with him, so it takes some time for both of these instruments to make their appearance in the work. The work is fairly calm and eminently listenable. The two soloists are in at 2 minutes and 50 seconds after a brief interlude. The two soloists wrap their lines around each other like an embrace in the calm section that follows. At 4 minutes and 15 seconds, a new approach begins in the trumpet with a watery-sounding tone. I'm not sure how that's produced. The orchestra continues its calming tones. At 6 minutes and 14 seconds, the trumpet starts some impressive glissandos, and the French horn and trumpet imitate each other's lines. They kind of remind me of dolphins playing here, keeping in line with the movement's water motif. Let's hear a little bit of this. I really hate to fade out on this very exciting section of the score, but we're going on a little too long here. A more exciting section emerges at 7 minutes, and you heard the beginning of it right there, with the trumpet and horn playing fortissimo leaps upward, and just as suddenly, the music calms again. The trumpet and horn here play in harmony, and the trumpet comes back with the watery tone we heard earlier at the end of the movement. Track 8 is the second movement, Fire. This starts with a gong and fortissimo outburst from the orchestra. The horn is then in with a powerful line, which the trumpet soon emulates. A new section starts. Kerschek's emulation of the flickering and ferocious nature of the fire element is just as effective as his emulation of water in the first movement. This movement sounds like it's on the march, consuming everything in its path, and the two soloists get ample opportunity to play out. Both the horn and trumpet get some jagged-sounding tone, perhaps produced by tonguing. Kerschek is creative with the sound the instruments produce too, and the soloists are admirably up to the challenge. The orchestra comes in with quiet, ghostly sounds, again, some creative orchestrating by Kerschek, and the soloists are back in with more lyrical lines wrapping around each other. The movement sort of dies out in the orchestra at the end. Track 9, the third movement, Earth. Kerschek is certainly creative, and here he gets a more solid, rock-like tone out of the soloists for his Earth movement. The rhythm makes the brass sound like they're at work on some kind of solid material. That kind of put me in mind of like the dwarves working in the mountain in Lord of the Rings. Let's hear a bit of this. So pretty interesting sound world and rhythm there. I guess, although Wagner in The Ring of the Nibelungs has, in Das Rheingold, he has a very specific rhythm for the forging of the ring. This kind of reminds me of similar kind of work, like people working with metal or rock or something, you know? Anyway, with earth elements. Pretty soon percussion is in to underline the rhythm. The rhythm ushers in calm string harmony. Eventually, the horn comes in with a legato melody. The material swells and suddenly vanishes back into the opening rhythm at the 5-minute mark. The two soloists are playing pianissimo here at a distance, the trumpet with a mute as the rhythm marches to the movement's end. And then the last movement, the fourth movement, Air, is heard on track 10. The two soloists begin the movement with separated rising lines. A wispy wind line appears, sounding like the wind blowing a leaf around. So far, this is a very quiet movement. I think I hear a wind machine in there, too, from the 18th century. Rapid, repeated notes are traded between trumpet and horn soloists. This movement, like the others, has a warm, inviting quality to it. But perhaps this movement is the warmest of all, with its comfortably resolving melodic lines. I liked the solo section from the 4-minute mark on, the horn starting a line and the trumpet providing the resolving response. At 5 minutes and 40 seconds, we hear the strings at forte dynamic for the first time in the movement. They play the line we heard earlier from the soloists in a soaring, above-the-world kind of way. The soloists trade lines over a lightly thumping melody at around the 6-minute mark. There are some orchestral splashes creating a grand mood and orchestral warmth in general, with the soloists gliding along, bringing the movement toward the end. There's a sudden pause, and the soloists get one more solo line together before the orchestra brings the work to a grand, comfortable, and very appealing close. This is an album that anyone looking for a way into contemporary classical music should hear. Both works are comfortable and easy on the ear, and the material in general is instantly appealing. Fazil Say's concerto utilizes Turkish rhythms at times, which are appealing in themselves, but otherwise emphasizes the interplay between the trumpet and organ soloists. His harmony doesn't have much spice to it, but he leaves that to the rhythm, particularly in the latter parts of the second movement. Meanwhile, Wolf Kerschek's work, The Four Elements, takes those water, fire, earth, air elements and creates a pleasing characterization of them through his creative orchestration and very gentle harmony. The two soloists here, Matthias Höfs and his son Tillmann, are given highly melodic parts that appealingly wrap around each other. Melodies are all well-shaped and tend to resolve in a satisfying folk-like way. This is an immediately appealing album of contemporary music, and if you're looking for a challenge, you might want to stay away. But that's the only reason you'd want to stay away from this. There's a lot to enjoy here, not least the inventive timbral combinations in both Kerschek's work and the rhythms from the East from Fazil Say's work.
I found both works attractive. The Say concerto had Turkish melodic influences, exciting percussion, and some surprises like the bluesy organ ending in the Anatolian Romance. The trumpet parts themselves had a lot of tricky tonguing for staccato lines, a variety of tonal shading with mutes, and fun interplay between the organ and trumpet. It's a unique piece. The Kerschek, I'm sure, would be a crowd pleaser in a live concert. There are musical elements identifiable with characteristics of the elements, like the sweeping string lines in water and then the drip like woodwinds. Great melodic lines that are instantly appealing in the water and air movements. Most of all, the interplay of the trumpet and horn lines and harmonies are very enjoyable. Impressive technique and musicality from Matthias Höfs and a fine showing from his son Tillmann. I found it was a fun record and should be enjoyed by all fans of brass.
Oh yeah, that too, brass.
On to the jazz side. 2026 is the 100th anniversary of the birth of both Miles Davis and John Coltrane, so naturally there are some recordings exclusively featuring their music coming out. That's where we'll be focusing in the jazz this week with some Charlie Parker as well. Parker's 100th was in 2020, and there were some excellent recordings in that year, like Bird at 100, featuring alto saxophonists Bobby Watson, Gary Bartz, and Vincent Herring, who we'll hear on the second album. But first, Suite for Miles from the Giovanni Falzone Libera Band. This came out on May 22nd on the Tuk Music label. Tuk Music is Italian trumpeter Paolo Fresu's label, and I wrote to them to try to get the full album notes, but I haven't got a reply. But hey, it's Italy, so that may come
you just expect that
in the
from
future.
Them. Yeah. No matter what you're looking for, you're not going to get a reply from Italy. I don't know what it is.
Anyway, I could pick up the essentials from the homepage and here and there on the internet, and I had better luck with the following two recordings. But first, this recording, trumpeter and composer Giovanni Falzone has a long experience also in the world of classical music. He began studying the trumpet at the age of 17 at the music school of the Band of Aragon. He enrolled at the Vincenzo Bellini Conservatory in Palermo, where he graduated, also graduating from the Giuseppe Verdi Conservatory in Milan. From 1996 to 2004, he worked with the Milan Symphony, playing with internationally renowned conductors. Since 2004, he's been dedicated to jazz and composition, also becoming a professor at the Milan Conservatory and at the New York University, Florence. As a composer, arranger, and band leader, he's released more than a dozen recordings and performed at major festivals around Europe. On this recording, Giovanni Falzone on the trumpet, Raffaele Fiengo on alto sax, Massimiliano Cameroni on piano.
What great names.
And Giuseppe La Gruta on electric bass, Riccardo Marchese on the drums. This was recorded in the Craftsman Recording Studios by Stefano Amerio. The recording gets started with a tune called Around 4. This is Falzone's original composition based around the famous 4 of Miles Davis. The horns start this out with staccato hits for a phrase that repeats over the rhythm section with busy electric bass figures and works into simultaneous improvisations. Falzone has made a new melody with snippets of Davis's 4 melody and some familiar chord changes to anchor you in spots. Let's hear this recording get started. Yeah, I got a little grin out of those identifiable similarities there. There's a change up in groove into some horn hits and drum exchanges in free time. Chirpy horn notes lead to a new groove from La Grutta's bass and improvisations from Falzone. Let's check some of that out as well. A lot of Milesisms in his ideas there. Fiengo joins in, and some curious vocal interjections come in too. Cameroni gets some piano improvising time with the horns layering on the opening staccato idea, and then more new lines to the end. You'll have to check out the rest by yourself. Track 2 is Milestone. That's singular, but everyone knows the 1958 recording Milestones, and all jazz fans know this melody. Here it's transformed, but familiar, with a modern chilled-out groove set by La Grutta's electric bass on the 16-measure intro. Let's take a listen from the horn melody entrance a little further in. I like the stretched feel on the B section there. Fiengo is up first for a solo on this one, and his intense alto tone is really neat. Let's take a listen. Falzone follows with a solo that grooves and stretches out in spots. Things quiet down for the start of Cameroni's piano solo that builds up and gets some horn trills working back into the A section melody lines to a hit to end it. Track 3 is an original by Falzone, Andalusia. Marchese gets this started on the drums. The melody is a jumpy exchange of lines between the horns, piano, and bass. It sounds like a repeating 9-measure idea. Then Falzone and Cameroni have an improvised dialogue that starts to become more intimate. Let's check it out. A slow groove is formed for Falzone's improvised ideas that work into more composed lines with sax and a harmonized legato theme. Let's hear some of that section that creates the Andalusian mood. Getting into some sketches of Spain, Solea-like territory there. He continues on with improvisations. Cameroni has piano improvisations with backing horns and vocalizations that get pretty intense into shrieks. It comes to a complete stop, and the opening theme returns with some variation into rubato sax improvisations over drums and some curious sounds to the end. Track 4 is Blue in Green from Miles Davis's 1959 Kind of Blue. Reading about this tune, it seems that Bill Evans probably had as much input into the composition as Davis did. It had an interesting 10-measure chord cycle after the intro, and it was a muted ballad on the famous Kind of Blue recording. Falzone plays it open and rubato from the start with just Cameroni before bass and drums join in. Let's take a sample from about a minute and a half in where you'll recognize the famous melody. Fiango joins in for some harmonized lines from there and also gets an improvised solo, getting joined by Falzone. And the ending of this tune is quite expressive, so let's listen to that. Track 5 is a Falzone original composition, Lo Sciamano, which means, I guess, the shaman. This starts with a beating bass heart and mysterious piano before the horns add short figures. A horn melody starts about 1 minute in that has some harmonic twists. There's a 24-measure section and then a repeat of the first phrases into more animated ideas before a final similar section. Let's check out some of it from where the horn melody comes in. Fiengo has a solo before Falzone, who gets a cadenza section before the ending. I'll leave you to check out the solos on this one for yourself. Track 6 is Sunrise and Solar. Solar is a composition written by Chuck Wayne and later recorded and copyrighted with small alterations by Miles Davis. It first appeared on Davis's 1954 album Miles Davis Quintet. Here it's a duet for Falzone and Cameroni. This opens with piano trickles like first light breaking through. Falzone joins in with trills. I guess that's the sunrise part, his original composition. It's kind of sparse to sample, so let's join in where Falzone brings the solar melody in rubato fashion a little ways in. It continues in rubato fashion with high half-valve ideas from Falzone and some lines of only breath, and after a final melody phrase he ends it with a low pedal tone. I liked the dreamy treatment, and the reverb works well for the atmosphere here. Track 7 is So What and Tutu. So What, of course, from Kind of Blue, Miles Davis's 1959 recording, and Tutu is the title track from his 1986 album, and it's written by Marcus Miller. Marchesi starts this out on the drums. The original has a laid-back groove, but this is really animated. If you know the original tune, you'll hear the bass lines that led to the horn hits doubled in bass and piano here, and Falzone has written new horn lines. It's pretty exciting. Things are off racing over walking electric bass for a solo from Fiengo that works to angsty screeches. The groove switches up to a more loping feel with horn hits to set up Cameroni for piano chord chiming, and Falzone has a really fun solo here. It's cool to hear the modes change up underneath just like in the original. Let's hear some of his playing on this one. Into some soft grooving with La Grutta's bass from there that leads to the tutu theme. Let's just hear a snippet of that. The original was quite funky, and this is pretty cool too. Track 8 is a Falzone original, Blue Miles. This starts with a repeated single F on the piano. The horns come in for 8 measures on top, and then there are 8 more measures with bass and drums joining piano chords. Let's pick it up from the main repeating 16-measure harmonized horn melody a little ways in. Cameroni is up first for a piano solo. We haven't sampled one from him yet, so let's check out some of his playing on this one. Falzone follows with a trumpet solo, and La Grutta gets a rich-toned and groovy bass solo. It ends up with a melody section and slowed ending with some final thoughts from Falzone. And the recording ends up with track 9, Wayne Shorter's Footprints. Shorter recorded this in 1966 on his own Adam's Apple, and also with the Miles Davis Quintet on Miles Smiles. The Miles Smiles version was chilled out and hypnotic with ostinato bass lines starting it out and carrying on under the 24-measure horn melody. Well, this is the double espresso version, starting out with some horn pulses into simultaneous improvisations over undulating electric bass from La Gruta before they get to the melody, and taking a detour before another round. Here's some intense interaction between Falzone and Fiengo a little bit later on, and we'll get some of those crazy vocalizations into this sample too. Comes to a pause and a reset for a final time through the melody. And that's the recording. Of this recording, Giovanni Falzone says, quote, "It's a work that wishes to pay tribute to Davis without going down the risky route of imitation. And I think he achieves that goal with a balance of the essence of the familiar material here, always reimagined in creative ways, and a few original tunes and new melodic lines in spots for Davis's material. In his soloing, too, Falzone includes licks and lines that recall Davis's style, but still shows his own personality and creativity with excellent trumpet chops and a sense of adventurism. Raffaele Fiengo is a good match on alto sax with an edgy tone and some blistering solos. The rhythm section is exciting throughout with pumping electric bass energy from Giuseppe La Gruta, explorative piano solos from Massimiliano Cameroni, and hard-hitting drums and driving grooves from Riccardo Marchese. In the end, it's a tribute that still shows a lot of innovation."
Yeah, I was a bit surprised at how groove-oriented this album was. Not in any continuously grooving sense, but what I mean is it seems to draw a lot from Miles's later funky style, like from Bitches Brew on, even in the earlier compositions. Giovanni Falzone really has some pair of lungs on him. He often blasts out his tone, seeming to want, along with Raffaele Fiengo's alto sax, to force open another dimension, and the album makes me wonder if Miles was doing the same. The album has certainly given me another way of looking at and thinking about Miles's music. The themes are all identifiable, but are given unique settings by this hyperactive-sounding group. This is not a record for the faint-hearted, and neither are Miles's albums from the 1970s onward. Sharply defined recording and dedicated, even fierce playing by all involved.
Yeah, another way to experience Miles Davis's music. And on that note, we're going to hear another kind of bird. Reimagining Charlie Parker from drummer Richard Baratta. This is on the Savant label. It also came out May 22nd. Now, we've talked about Richard Baratta's interesting career before, so I'll just make a quick summary here. Originally a jazz drummer in New York in the 1970s, playing with musicians like Vernon Reid and Hal Galper, he got into the film industry in the 1980s, going from location manager to unit production manager to co-producer and executive producer, working on more than 50 films. Just to name a few, the Academy Award-nominated Joker, Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, Doctor Strange, The Wolf of Wall Street, and 5 Spider-Man movies. Now he's returned to music with 2020's Music in Film The Real Deal and 2022's Music in Film The Sequel, taking up famous songs from movies. And back in episode 130, Lovin' Good Vibes from September 2023, we discussed Off the Charts, also on Savant. That one featured Dave Kokoski on piano as well. And that was a recording of compositions by jazz greats that Baratta felt haven't received their due attention over the years. And then in March of last year, in episode 203, Harmonic Haze, we discussed Looking Back, also on Savant. And that had jazz versions of 1960s rock tunes done in fun ways. Yeah. And now, Baratta has turned his attention to the music of Charlie Parker that presents a different challenge. From the booklet notes written by Raymond Osnato, quote, "Move too far from the source and risk modernity for its own sake. Stay too close and the result can feel reverential but inert. The challenge is not whether to honor the tradition, but how." Baratta says he doesn't want to keep making straight-ahead records, but rather keep challenging himself. What stands out on the recording is that this isn't a playthrough of the tunes, but a new context in creative arrangements by pianist Bill O'Connell. In the booklet, the music is described as spanning post-bop drive, Latin-inflected grooves, and with flashes of rock-tinged energy. I think that's a good description, and that you'll find that it holds together in an exciting way. Thanks to Nettie Jones at High Note Savant Records for sending the digital booklet for the album to me. That was indeed helpful and gave a lot of insight. Also, it's interesting to note that Savant Records was founded by Joe Fields, who once owned Savoy Records that held Charlie Parker's original catalog of recordings. So the lineup here: Richard Baratta on drums and percussion, Bill O'Connell on piano, Rhodes, and the arranger of all the tunes here, Paul Bolenbeck on guitar, Michael Getz on bass, Paul Rossman on congas and percussion, Vincent Herring on alto sax, Craig Handy on flute on one track, soprano sax on one track, and tenor sax on 2 tracks. I'll point them out as we go along. Eric Alexander on tenor sax on 2 tracks, and Abraham Burton on alto sax on 2 tracks. That's a lot of saxes. In the album notes, Baratta says, quote, "In the history of jazz, nobody has made more of an impact than Parker, so I thought I'd pay homage to his legacy by adding more horns." Good idea.
It paid off.
Paid off. This was produced by Richard Baratta and Bill O'Connell, recorded at Trading 8's Music in Paramus, New Jersey on October 10th and 11th, 2025, engineered and mixed by Chris Sullett, mastered by David Darlington at Bass Hit Recording Studios in New York. All songs are compositions by Charlie Parker unless otherwise mentioned. And we start out with Donna Lee. This is a tune based on the chord changes of the jazz standard Indiana, or Back Home Again in Indiana. Interestingly, Miles Davis also claimed authorship of this tune that was recorded in 1947 for Savoy. We'll get a taste right away of the creative arranging from Bill O'Connell on this one with an extended intro section, starting things out with some Latin feel aided by Paul Rossman's percussion. O'Connell gets some improvisations, and Baratta has panning drum fills under sax lines. It builds up to the melody for about a minute, which is played in boppy unison on alto sax and Bolenbeck's guitar, with other sax lines building around and joining in. All the saxes are in on this tune. Herring and Burton on alto, and Handy and Alexander on tenor. Let's hear things get started. bopping along on the melody there. Now, the album booklet doesn't indicate the soloists or order, but I'm going to say it's herring on the first alto sax solo over a stop-time feel and then swinging over walking bass. And next is a tenor sax solo. It sounds like Alexander there. Then there's trading from alto and tenor, and I think this is Burton on alto and Handy on tenor. So let's hear some of those exchanges a little bit later on. O'Connell gets an exciting piano solo next, and a building arrangement of horns with percussion leads into some drum fills from Baratta into a final time through the melody. Track 2 is Anthropology from Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, also known as Thriving from a Riff or Thriving on a Riff. It's a rhythm changes tune first recorded by Parker in 1945. O'Connell starts this out on piano and gets joined by Handy's tenor sax and the rhythm section on an interesting intro idea. The melody is handled in a thick unison sound from both saxes, just Herring and Handy on this one, and guitar and piano. The groove is interesting. Listen to the bass and O'Connell's left hand under the melody, and it gets more Latin-y on the B section of the tune. Let's check it out. Up first for an alto solo, sounding soulful and with a few bird-flavored licks. Bullenbach has a guitar solo too, building up harmonic tension in fun ways, and then O'Connell is up on piano. Let's check out his playing on this one, and notice Bullenbach's interesting tone on his backing and Baratta's fun drum fills. And back to the melody from there, with Baratta taking the B section of the tune as a drum solo. Track 3 is Little Suede Shoes. I think this is usually known as My Little Suede Shoes. It's from 1952. If you know the original, it's a calypso-flavored AABA tune that starts out with some Latin percussion, so it's an obvious choice to do something with here, and O'Connell has made a fun arrangement. Handy's on flute on this one, and the opening arrangement has him together with the bass answering lines from Herring, who takes the main melody. Bolenbach gets little echoes of the melody lines on the first A, and then flute and the others on the repeat, working the B lines together over a groove change-up. Let's hear it get going. After the melody, a drum fill and a little line make a transition into a piano solo from O'Connell over interesting changing rhythmic feels in the bass. Herring has an alto solo with uplifting melodic ideas, but we've got to check out Handy's flute solo on this one. O'Connell gets a new section started from there that gets newly composed lines for the woodwinds and guitar over the A sections into the B and final A of the original tune, and a cute finish. Track 4 is A Lucha, a contrafact of Honeysuckle Rose in the A section and I Got Rhythm in the B section, first recorded by Parker for Savoy Records in 1948. This gets a very funky reimagination with O'Connell on Rhodes and some wah-wah-like effects from Bolenbach. All the saxes are in for this one, with Handy on soprano sax and Getz on electric bass here. It gets a 16-measure intro and 2 rounds of the A section, plus another 8-measure interlude before they go all the way through the tune, with Handy taking the B section on soprano. So let's take a sample from about a minute in. Off on a soprano sax solo first, and Eric Alexander is up on tenor next with cheering lines from the other saxes, so let's check out some of his playing on this one. Viols with a dark but cutting sound, rocking it out on this tune. I'm still grinning from his Black Magic Woman solo with the Motor City Octet recording we heard a few episodes back. They bring back an A section of the melody as a transition to improvised trading from Herring and Burton's alto saxes before finishing it with the final A section. Track 5 is George and Ira Gershwin's Embraceable You, written in 1928 and included in the 1930 Broadway musical Girl Crazy. Charlie Parker first recorded it in 1947. It's ballad time, and Bollenbach really sets the dreamy mood with warm-toned guitar on the intro here before Herring is in on the melody. Baratta is at his most delicate here with sensitive cymbal and hi-hat work. At this tempo, we'll be able to just hear it get started. O'Connell gets to show off his lighter touch on a classy solo, and Herring sounds great coming back in for a stretched out ending. I'll leave you to check out the rest of this one on your own. Track 6, Now's the Time, riffy original Charlie Parker blues first recorded in 1945. A rock beat for this one, and Baratta gets it started. Bollenbach has some ideas on the introduction before joining Herring for the melody. The 12-bar blues becomes 14 bars with Baratta breaking it up on the 7th and 8th measures. Let's check it out. After the second time around, O'Connell's arrangement has a cool little segue with guitar into a break for a solo from Herring. O'Connell gets a segue into his piano solo too. Then it's Baratta's turn for some drumming with hits from everyone and trades with Bollenbach. Let's check that out. To the melody from there, which ends suddenly after the 6th measure on the second time around. Track 7 is Moose the Mooch, a rhythm changes tune written and recorded by Charlie Parker in 1946. This tune is hard enough with its jumpy melody lines, but they give it some polyrhythmic trickery on the opening with Getz's bass loping on descending lines that will make you dizzy when Herring's melody comes in on top. Let's keep on listening here to check out Bolenbach's solo on this one. Follows, and Bolenbach has some interesting scratchy and wah-wah backing ideas. O'Connell has a solo too that gets some fun backing lines from Herring and Bolenbach. Baratta takes a solo over the A sections of the tune into the B and final A, and Herring and Baratta continue on playfully to a fade-out on this one. Track 8 is Yardbird Suite, a 32-bar AABA tune, also recorded in 1946. This one gets kind of a samba treatment. The intro has pushing syncopated lines and breaks for Baratta. Herring takes the happy melody, and O'Connell is up first for a solo. Herring follows O'Connell, so let's check out his alto sax solo on this one. Bollenbach has an energetic solo too. They bring back the intro idea for 2 rounds into a final time through the melody. Track 9 is Segment, a 32-measure minor tune with an improvised B section recorded by Parker in 1949. This gets a spacey, straight feel at the start with O'Connell on Rhodes and atmospheric guitar from Bollenbach. Baratta's crisp cymbal work and fills on the B section really stand out. Herring's off on a solo there, and let's check out some of O'Connell's Rhodes solo on this one. Bollenbach has an edgy solo that works into neat lines together with Herring before they get back to a final time around the melody. And the recording finishes up with Au Prival, a 12-bar bebop blues recorded in 1951. The title sounds French, but apparently has no real meaning. This gets an interesting rhythmic feel with syncopated piano chord and bass hits that get started on the 8-measure intro. Herring and Bollenbach take the melody together in unison. Is up first for a solo. Herring follows with a switch up to a swing feel over walking bass, and he's followed by O'Connell. After another time through the melody, they vamp out for some drum time from Baratta, so let's check that out to the end. Richard Baratta's latest effort reimagines the music of Charlie Parker in our time with the help of creative arrangements by Bill O'Connell. Baratta swings, sambas, rocks, and more with a variety of rhythmic grooves that make you experience Parker's music in new ways while still keeping the spirit of the melodies. Baratta gives most of the spotlight to the others here, taking just a few solo spots, but his drumming throughout is exciting and extremely clear on the recording. O'Connell's solos are great both on piano and Rhodes, and Paul Bolenbach shows off his versatility and style and tone, shape-shifting into whatever the mood calls for with a lot of creative ideas. Michael Getz's bass is solid and drives the grooves, while Paul Rossman's congas and percussion give the tunes some extra Latin spice. Sax is the other essential ingredient for showcasing Parker's work, and Vincent Herring is featured on melodies and standout solos straight through the recording. Craig Handy has spots to shine on tenor, soprano sax, and flute, and Eric Alexander and Abraham Burton guest on 2 tunes, adding to the excitement. I wonder what Richard Baratta will challenge himself with next, but we'll surely be listening.
Yeah, he certainly comes up with really interesting ideas for albums, too, and I was pretty intrigued by this one. It's really quite a star-studded album with a lot of adult music favorites on it.
Yes.
All soloists are given plenty of space to set the tone of the tracks. Paul Bolenbach, you mentioned him so many times when you were talking about this album, and he stood out for me, too. And Bill O'Connell, too, especially have an influence on the sounds of this album with the changing of tone from Bolenbach's clean and dirty sounds to O'Connell switching between piano and Fender Rhodes. Reimagining Charlie Parker is indeed what the album does, with the tracks all presenting these compositions in a really classy style. The album comes across as, well, enjoyable, with the famous themes registering fully, and with some good soloing from Bolenbach and O'Connell, along with Vincent Herring, Eric Alexander, Abraham Burton, Craig Handy, and Richard Baratta himself. There's such a lineup here. Baratta gets a few solos in the album, too, and he hits hard when he does. This is the sort of thing we've come to expect from a Richard Baratta album, an album with a theme, familiar tunes given a classy style. At least that's what's happened on the albums with his that we've heard on the podcast. I've only heard the other 2 that we've listened to. And I actually have them both on CD, and I guess I'm going to have to get this one, too. It's always great to hear these compositions, especially when they're played with the authority that they're given here by, current musicians. It's just really great to hear.
All right, and we've got one more. A Love Supreme Revisited by Mathias Heise and the Danish Radio Big Band. This also came out May 22nd. And thanks to Jan Schmitt from April Records for getting back to me so quickly with the credits for this recording. Born in 1993, Matthias Heise is a Danish chromatic jazz harmonica player. He started playing the harmonica at the age of 7, later also taking up the piano. He attended the Danish Rhythmic Music Conservatory for a year, being the first student with the harmonica as his main instrument. At the age of 20, he won the 2013 Chromatic Harmonica World Championship. In 2015, he was awarded the New Jazz Star of the Year in Denmark. The same year, his band Matthias Heise Quadrillion was nominated Best New Jazz Act at the Danish Music Awards. In March 2017, he was awarded the Ben Webster Prize, the youngest recipient ever, and he's recorded with the Danish Radio Big Band before with The Beast in 2018, which was nominated Best Album at the Danish Music Awards 2019. We talked about his recording Mouth Games that was on Storyville Records with one of our favorite bassists, Thomas Fanesbach, and that was in November of 2023 on episode 141, Solo Septet and Symphonic Sounds. Now, everyone knows A Love Supreme, John Coltrane's recording released in January 1965 on Impulse Records. A Love Supreme became one of the most acclaimed jazz records in history, and critics have called it one of the most important albums of post-war jazz. By 1970, it had sold about 500,000 copies. It's been called a definitive tone poem. It's an intensely spiritual recording, and although the music is complex, it also reaches people on a primal level that makes it accessible. Coltrane died in 1967, and the music on his 7 releases after A Love Supreme has him continuing his search in more free areas that can be more challenging to comprehend. Even with the broad appeal of A Love Supreme, in the album notes, Heise mentions that the music had remained closed and inaccessible to him until one day, driving in his car to a gig, the music opened itself to him while playing the CD. becoming a multi-dimensional painting. He says, quote, "On A Love Supreme, the listener is invited on a journey into the great magical mystery that lies beyond our physical world."
Yeah, and I get what he's saying here, too, because I've had musical compositions open up to me after, months, even years of not understanding them. And then, I guess it has to do with your experience and what you bring to it.
Now, I think most of our listeners are seasoned music fans and musicians, but I'm sure there are some people out there who are new to jazz listening in. So I would suggest that if you've never heard John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, stop the podcast now and listen to that before you continue listening to us talk about this or listen to Heise's revisiting this recording here. You could think of A Love Supreme almost as a sacred text of jazz, so it would be beyond adventurous for a saxophonist to try to expand upon it, let alone a harmonica player creating a version for big band. This is a really courageous endeavor.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting one, too, as it turns out.
Very much.
Yeah, especially if you know the original recording, though.
Here's the cast of performers, and pardon my Danish or any other language mispronunciations here. So we've got Matthias Heise on chromatic harmonica and all arrangements, conductor Nikolai Bogelund, trumpets and flugelhorn Lars Wissing-Reimann, Ari Bragi Karlsson, Thomas Kiergo, Mads Lecour, Jakob Sorensen, Gidon Nunes-Vaz, and Dorothy Zilke. The trombone section, and also the credits say tenor horn, Peter Dahlgren, Peter Hangsel, Annette Saxe, Gustav Wickland on trombone and bass trombone, and Jakob Munk on bass trombone, tuba, and also vocals. The sax section, Peter Fuglsang, alto and soprano sax, clarinet and flute as well, Nikolai Scholz on alto sax and flute, Hans Ulrich on tenor sax, clarinet, flute, and alto flute, Carl Martin Almqvist, tenor and soprano saxophone and clarinet, Frederick Menzies, bari sax, bass clarinet, and clarinet, Per Gade on guitar, Magnus Hjort on piano, Kasper Vadshot on bass, and Søren Frost on drums. The recording was produced by Matthias Heise, recorded by Lars C. Brun, mixed by Morten Buchert, mastered by Brian Mork Hansen. The artistic director for the Danish Radio Big Band is Birger Carlsen, and the big band producer is Fimmer Engel. Coltrane's A Love Supreme unfolds in 4 parts. Part 1 is acknowledgement, Part 2 resolution, Part 3 pursuance, and Part 4 psalm. Heise has added an introduction, interludes, and a unique concluding addition. So let's begin with A Love Supreme introduction. This is less than 2 minutes and creates a big first impression with dramatic drums and a gong. And a gong is how Coltrane's album opens, originally into some sax figures. Let's hear how this recording gets started. It really sets a unique atmosphere. Track 2 is Part 1, Acknowledgement, and Heise explains that this is an act of recognition of God. After the gong and opening sax on Coltrane's original, the next section begins with the 4-note bass motif from bassist Jimmy Garrison that makes the basis for the first movement. After some lines featuring the trombones here, Heise takes Coltrane's iconic opening phrase, now played by the entire saxophone section along with him, while the rest of the band moves through lines harmonized with a new system based on the double harmonic minor scale. So you've got a flat third, a raised fourth, and a flat sixth. In the key of C, for easy reference, that would be C, D, E flat, F sharp, G, A flat, and B. Let's hear this version get started. And let's hear some of Heise's harmonica solo further on when a backing arrangement comes in. In the notes, Heise states that, quote, "Where Coltrane lets the theme move through all 12 keys in his solo, I let the entire band follow, counter melodies, counterlines, bass motion, and chords," end of quote. The motif bounces around the sections, and the arrangement builds to a climax with shakes and a fall in the trumpets before Caspar Wajtrold brings the motif back to the bass, and we get the famous chant. So I'm sure you're wondering how that sounds, so let's just sample a little bit.
Allah Supreme, 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 Allah Supreme.
And after the chant, everyone drops out, leaving Caspar Wajtrold to finish the movement with bass improvisations. Track 3 is Interlude number 1. Frederick Menzies starts this on Barry sax, joined by bass trombonist Jakob Munk on vocals. Let's hear some of this from a little bit in when the vocal joins the sax and gets into some surprising throat singing. His voice goes even lower, and then Menzies is left alone with improvisations to the end. Track 4 is Part 2, Resolution. In the notes, Heise says, quote, "The second part of A Love Supreme, Resolution, is for Coltrane about the decision, the moment you choose to follow God. The music carries this determination within it with a raw, unavoidable energy. At the same time, this part of the suite also contains, in my opinion, one of Coltrane's greatest recorded solos. The phrases are so beautiful, so strong, in a sense so true that one suspects a direct connection to something beyond. For that reason, I couldn't resist making this solo the central element of my own version. I have transcribed Coltrane's entire solo and given it to the saxophone section and the harmonica, and then built the big band arrangement around it." End of quote. This gets started by the drums into a swinging band arrangement and an edgy guitar solo from Per God. All that happens before we hear the melody from Heise. I'll leave you to check out the start of the tune. Let's take a sample from the melody about 2 minutes in that's played in unison on harmonica and guitar and then works into some solo harmonica lines and a full band arrangement. Next, Maunus Hjort has a piano solo. I'm sure that you want to hear the transcription of Coltrane's solo on harmonica with the sax section if you're familiar with Coltrane's original recording, so let's sample some of that too. Cool. It goes on, getting brass stabs and a building arrangement, and the final melody section has a powerful full band arrangement. Track 5 is Interlude number 2. This has quiet wind lines with flute standing out and features the drums of Soren Frost focusing on the toms. Let's hear a little bit of it. Track 6 is Part 3, Pursuance, from Heise's notes. Quote, "The third part of A Love Supreme, Pursuance, is for Coltrane about following God, about living a life in God's image, with all the challenges and unwavering striving that come with it. The music carries a fierce, forward-driving energy that mirrors the very movement of trying to become a better human being, and it mirrors something deeply musical as well, the endless striving musicians know when we practice, explore, and attempt to push the boundaries of what is possible on our instruments." End of quote. The original starts with a long drum solo from Elvin Jones, and Soren Frost gets it going with the drums here. For this movement, Heise writes that he chose to let individuals in the big band lead, so Mads Lacour is up almost immediately for a trumpet solo. I want you to hear Coltrane's minor blues melody, so we'll start about a minute and a half in and continue into the second solo, which is by Peter Dahlgren on trombone. Nikolai Schultz follows with a fine flute solo that gets backing lines, and then there's an exciting tenor sax battle between Hans Ulrich and Karl Martin Almqvist, a fitting tribute for Coltrane. Let's hear some of that too, once it's raging and has exciting backing brass stabs. Finally, Heise returns, leading the melody arrangement with drum fills spacing out the ending. Track 7 is Harmonica Cadenza. The last note from Pursuance carries into this cadenza that starts out with a lonely atmosphere. Let's sample this about a minute or so in to hear some of Heise's impressive playing. And interesting. And the recording ends up with track 8, part 4, Psalm, Heise's notes say, quote, "The fourth and final part, Psalm, is Coltrane's prayer. In his own liner notes, one finds a long, devoted text addressed to God, which Coltrane performs on the album word for word through his saxophone. In my version, I have taken his saxophone prayer and rewritten it as a full big band arrangement. The melody, the phrasing, and the intention are Coltrane's, but the harmony is built on the double harmonic minor scale and the system I have developed from it." End of quote. Now, if you know the original, it's played in a rubato fashion throughout. Heise's arrangement is interesting with a pulse that starts in the tuba from the start. This features solos from Gideon Nunes-Vaz on flugelhorn and Peter Fulson on soprano sax. For time's sake, I'll leave you to check them out. Now, Heise has chosen to have Psalm flow into Coltrane's Alabama, first recorded in 1963 and appearing on Coltrane's 1964 album Live at Birdland. It's believed that Coltrane conceived of and performed the composition in response to the 16th Street Baptist church bombing on September 15, 1963. In the notes, Heise writes, quote, "The music carries a grief and a dignity that continues directly from Psalm, and the two pieces share a musical identity, C minor, a contemplative tone, a spiritual gravity. For that reason, it felt natural to let my reinterpretation of Coltrane's masterpiece end here, with Alabama's magnificent harmonic and melodic ending, which to me is one of the strongest in jazz history." End of quote. Let's hear his harmonica on the rubato start of that mournful theme. Now, I've just given you samples of some of the essential moments of the recording, and out of necessity skipped many of the solos, but it's really something that should be listened to in its entirety from beginning to end. In fact, why not revisit Coltrane's recording first and then have a listen to this? The original work is only 33 minutes long, and this is 44 minutes. As Heise points out in his notes, there is a church in San Francisco, St. Coltrane, which considers a love supreme a sacred document, as no doubt many musicians and serious lovers of jazz do. Revisiting a recording like this has to be done in a certain way, and Matthias Heise approaches it with reverence and creativity, expanding Coltrane's original ideas into impressive arrangements for the Danish radio big band. Heise's harmonica playing is technically accomplished and musically expressive, and the musicianship of the ensemble and soloists is admirable throughout. It's a very interesting and satisfying undertaking on many levels.
I was really surprised at how successful this album was, especially given that the lead instrument's a harmonica, but Heise is a great player with some really great ideas. This was a fascinating listen to a jazz work that's fascinating in itself. Having a big band play a Love Supreme adds a lot of texture to the composition. Like even right at the beginning, hearing the band come in with Coltrane's original sax line is kind of interesting. It almost kind of etches it in stone, whereas Coltrane sounds a little more wild, I guess, in his playing, or a little bit more edgy, but the band kind of neatens it up a bit. And I thought that was kind of a nice gesture, actually. There's some great growling brass moments, and having the harmonica doubled by band instruments helps boost the sound. Heise himself manages some soulfulness on the harmonica, and he's extremely virtuosic to a surprising degree in his solos, with some lightning-fast arpeggio playing, especially in his track 7 cadenza. It's really great to hear a lot of these solos taken by brass instruments other than the sax, giving the work a bit more tonal color.
Yeah.
And, it was kind of interesting. It kind of draws you in a bit more and makes you focus in on what was being played, by Coltrane. And then you go back and I don't know, there's more to it than when you hear that.
Yeah.
The recording has a good sense of urgency, and there's a welcome clarity to the massed band sound. Of course, it doesn't match the legendary original recording, because those guys were just so on that day, too. It's one of those days where I guess we have to be grateful that they went into the studio on that particular day to record the album, too. Everything seemed to work for that album, as well as it just being a great composition and concept. The broader array of timbre is what caught me about this album. There's so much to say about it, really. It expresses another facet of Coltrane's conception, and we really can't get enough of those. I loved the orchestration. The recording put me in mind of the original Coltrane Quartet recording while giving me a sense of new discovery of this endlessly fascinating composition.
Well, there you have it. 3 new recordings with reimagined works of jazz giants. And they were all interesting and satisfying in their own way.
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting week, I have to say, in the jazz category.
And that's going to bring us to the end of episode 261. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to take a week off next week. And we have, as of now, a not decided menu for the next episode.
We'll put them up, though. Don't worry. Coming soon.
We'll put those up sometime before the next episode comes around. I've got one that I know I'm going to talk about, and that is the new release from trombonist David Gibson with Darkness Blooms. We really enjoyed his previous release. There's a couple other possibilities, but I also want to see what comes out next week and make my picks from those as well.
Yeah, I've got an album that I know that I'm going to do too, and it's an album of 4A works for violin and piano, including the 2 violin sonatas, which I just love. The pianist on the album is Jonathan Fornell, who I'm really interested in, and that's why I wanted to hear this. And the violinist is Kersan Leong. It's the sonatas for violin and piano transcriptions, too, for violin and piano, so I think we'll definitely be doing that one. And I got to come up with 2 more. I have some ideas, but not sure yet.
Once we decide, we'll put all the recordings together on a playlist on Deezer, so keep your eye open for that. And we'll also have a link to it from our Facebook page. And we'll plan to be back again on June 15th with a regular episode. Thanks, as always, to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. Any final thoughts, Mike?
I've got nothing. I got nothing.
You got nothing?
Yeah. Just a blank space, just a dial tone. Remember those? When you had the phone, you had that ooh sound. That's what my brain's doing right now.
I think you've been put into a state of love supreme.
There it is. That might be it. That album really did kind of bring me close to the divinity.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap things up here and be back in 2 weeks. So until then, keep listening, and we'll see you again for episode 262.